Thank you very much to the organisers for the invitation, and also thank you very much to my introduction this morning as being some sort of honours project supervisor. I must say it was one of the nicest projects that I supervised, you know. So I'm here to ask the question and try to answer it. Is an upper ontology useful? And I'll start off by looking at upper. What does it mean? I think everybody agrees that when we talk about an upper ontology, we're talking about something that's a little bit more abstract than what we're going to be working with as the main job. Abstract somehow means kind of coarser grained, bigger chunks, more generalized, but then it also means kind of more remote from experience. It also can mean more difficult to understand, vague, difficult to actually enable people to capture quickly what it is that might be contained within these terms. It's also flexible. That's the upper bit. The abstract bit is, again, very important. So I talk about a Goldilocks level of abstraction. So in the OWL world, we've got OWL thing and OWL nothing. Both of those are kind of like very precise, very, very abstract and utterly useless if you want to actually do anything with them. You need something in the middle that you can kind of work with. But equally, having an upper ontology with thousands of classes and properties is unhelpful. So you want something that's got an appropriate level of abstraction. So given those two things, I'm starting a little conversation with you about the kind of things that an upper ontology might be useful for. And all of this is kind of coming from personal experience and experience of colleagues in Semantic Arts, which is the company that I work with, company that I work for. And what we do is going to any type, any number of enterprises and help them sort out their information assets using semantic web technologies. And over the 20-odd years that the company has been in business, we've been developing an upper level ontology. And why do we do that? Well, the first thing is that when we go and start a piece of work, we don't want to start from OWL thing and OWL nothing. We want to throw out onto our palette a number of very useful top-level classes and top-level properties as well. And we don't want them to be, they're kind of like our primary colors, but they're not entirely primary as some upper-level ontologies do things. We want them to be kind of useful and recognizable, something along a kind of Goldilocks level of abstraction. So in GIST, you'll see things like category, collection, organization, commitment, event, physical identifiable item, intention, place, these sort of things. They're pretty abstract, but they're not too abstract, okay? They're things that almost everybody in the enterprise can say, I've got something and I think it would hook onto this or that, or maybe these two, okay? So you can begin to start a conversation with these building blocks, the initial kind of palette of classes and properties. Why is that useful? Well, it saves you a heck of a lot of effort. Okay, you're always going to have to do that with every ontology that you do. Okay, so why not just kind of preload, prepare? The next thing then is, if you do that, you will have some commonality between every piece of ontology work that you do. Within it, you're going to have a small number, the same classes, a small number of the same properties, all defined in exactly the same way, all behaving in exactly the same way. So you will have commonality. And in the little picture that you've got in front of you, you can see that we've got building and personnel that occur in both domain ontologies. There's another domain ontology that's got some other higher level concepts that don't appear in the one on the left-hand side. And that's fine. Okay? So commonality between the domain ontologies means that whenever you're doing your work, okay, you know that at a later date, you can take information from one of those areas and merge it with information in the other area because of the commonality. But the other thing is that you begin to start understanding those top level concepts and their applicability to subclasses, subproperties in a much, much deeper and better way. So over time, you become better at doing the work because you started off with that core. The next thing that I want to talk about is logical consistency of models. Quite often people kind of forget to put axioms in their models. They just have, you know, here's a class and here's something that I'm going to call it narrow, but we don't really know what the heck it means. So there are certain things that are important for people, and that's the definitions. But the other thing for the machine are the axioms that you put in. We use OWL. And one of the most important things, in addition to the class-subclass relationships, I think, is disjoints. To be able to say right at the beginning, this lot of things is not that lot of things, okay? It's a very important distinction that you have to make in order to kind of begin to compartmentalize your thinking, the thinking of your reasoner. And yeah, we've got the open world assumption and all the rest of it. So you can always, you know, say things that are not stated in your model or that counter what's in your model. The reasoner will barf at it. You know, sometimes you want to be able to put things in. But I think some of the high-level axioms put in at the beginning and have those in that palette that you put in means that a lot of the heavy lifting has been done early on. And quite often what happens is that a lot of people over many years of work experience have been putting that together, okay? So it saves you a lot of person hours work if you can bring that in. Other kind of constraints that we might talk about for properties are domain and range constraints. And those are fundamental to RDFS reasoning, also important in our reasoning as well. One of the things that we've been talking about, and it's popped up at a few people's presentations here, is the organizational culture and the language that's used. And actually, an upper level ontology is extremely helpful when people right the way across the organization start beginning to use these terms in their daily conversation about work. It becomes a common vocabulary if you have terms that people resonate with. If there are terms in your upper level ontology that people click to, find it helpful to say, you know, things like, I'm talking about a physical identifiable item, you know, not an identifier, and things like that. It helps people to express concepts a little bit better if you've got the common vocabulary right the way through. So we've been talking in different presentations about how everybody in the organization, particularly subject matter experts, can contribute to the information model. These involve lots of conversations, having an upper level ontology in terms that most people can connect with, can resonate with, can see their world in. enables that vocabulary to become used as a kind of lingua franca across the organization. And when it becomes embedded, it then becomes part of a tool for thought, because the psychologists will tell you about the limited capacity of holding things in your working memory. And the more that those are chunked in the same way between people, the better it is for different people to be working on the same problem, similar chunks, and getting kind of same interpretations of the information that they're dealing with. So the chunkability of information by using shared terms of an upper level ontology within an enterprise, we think is particularly helpful. It's the sort of thing that we see people in the enterprises that we work with starting to do. We do it ourselves all the time. I mentioned the Goldilocks level of abstraction, and that gives us an idea of the size of the concept, the kind of concept chunk size. What we find also throughout the history of GIST, which is the enterprise upper level ontology that semantic arts has developed over 20 odd years, is that there's been a surprising constancy in terms of the numbers of concepts in the whole ontology. It tends to be something in the order of 130-ish concepts throughout all its versions, and probably 300 plus with predicates and things like that. And what we find is that when we're beginning to develop domain ontologies, that we again keep them at probably no more than a couple of times that. So we tend to kind of naturally end up at something in the order of between 200 and 300 kind of concepts maximum, and maybe 600 concept, properties and classes total. And I think that this is really important. To my mind, the scale of these things is something like the numbers of people that were in your year at school, that's about 150-ish, and then the size of the school. And it's somewhere in between those, tends to be the size of the ontologies that we build. And this is really important, because when you have something that's a behemoth of an ontology, nobody can get to know it. Nobody can possibly become expert in something that is so large. And yet people have got to be able to use these in different ways. They've either got to be able to use them to build information architectures of their instance data, and they've got to be able to communicate these concepts with subject matter experts in order to find out what's the appropriate bit in the ontology for the data that they're dealing with. So maintaining a human level of scale for something that people can get their head around is really important. Another thing that upper level ontologies are useful for, surprisingly, is actually integrating data from multiple data stores. Now, you might have thought that this was the very first thing that it would be useful for, but actually there are lots of other things that you can find great use for the upper level ontology before you hit this. But yeah, if you use an upper level ontology, what you're not going to be doing is creating multiple silos of data that don't connect. What you're doing here is that you're maintaining domains, but making sure that there are plenty of high-level connections between them. And if you do that, then another thing that the upper level ontology will help you with is partitioning data. And partitioning is very useful from at least two perspectives. So one of them is that it enables you at the level of the upper ontology concept to shrink down the size of your search. So if you have a judicious use of upper level ontology concepts early in subqueries, you can then begin to partition the data for the more refined part of your query. I guess to some extent, not only is that logically helping you, but also in a computational way, it's also kind of helping you. But I'm certain about that from the practice of it, in that there's many times when the only way with triple stores, particularly like Neptune and others, where you're not so sure about the efficiency of their query planner, that you've got to do the work for them. That's where having an upper level ontology really helps. And so my conclusion to the question is that yes, absolutely, an upper level ontology is useful. Don't leave home without one. You know, don't start any ontology work without choosing one. Try and use one, the same one for all of your ontologies, so that they're all kind of connected. There are a number of upper level ontologies out there already. Some of them are more abstract than others. I'm not sure that you could express fiat continuum boundary with everybody in an organization and get an immediate resonance, you know? But I do think that you could represent like organization, concept, identifier, and things like that. So I would urge you to take a look at GIST, which doesn't appear very much on the sort of academic papers and things, because it's something that we use in business. We don't, you know, we're not a research organization and don't spend our time writing about it. We just use it. But it is open and it is available on an open license. And it is extremely successful in terms of being used as the foundation for enterprise ontology work. That really is the end of my presentation. So thank you very much.